All right, recording in progress. With housekeeping out of the way, we are again thrilled for today's talkback and Q&A with the star of the film herself, Julia Scotti, and director Susan Sandler, moderated by Alex Berg. And what can I say about this documentary? It is tender, moving, and hilarious. Julia Scotti, Funny That Way, documents the triumphant comeback of 65-year-old transgender comedian Julia Scotti. In the comedy boom of the late 1980s, Rick Scotti was appearing on bills with Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock when he came to the realization that nothing felt right. At a time when gender transitions were rare, Rick's awakening led to a new identity as Julia Scotti, and everyone turned away. Most painfully, Julia was shut out of contact with her children. She reinvented herself and spent a decade teaching. In 2010, this Scotti burst onto the comedy scene with an appearance on the NBC show, you might have heard of it, America's Got Talent. And now in her 11th year back, she's breaking down both age and gender barriers everywhere. And it's all on display in the new documentary, Julia Scotti, Funny That Way. Shot over a period of 5 years, the film tracks Julia's comeback, life on the road, and the return of her children as comedy becomes a shared language of identity, healing, and joy. Again, we're so proud and honored to have you here, Julia. Julia uses she, her pronouns with us today to talk about her experience as well as the film. So thank you, Julia,
Thank
so
you for
much.
having me. Boy, I feel so special.
You are.
I didn't know I did all that.
Yeah, right? There's a whole film about you. And we're also pleased to welcome the director, Susan Sandler, also using she, her pronouns. Susan's screenplays and teleplays include the Golden Globe nominated Crossing Delancey and Friends at Last, as well as projects for Sony Pictures, 20th Century Fox, Disney, TNT, and Columbia. Her work for the stage has been produced in New York at major theaters across the country and around the world. Her plays include Crossing Delancey, Under the Bed, The Renovation, The Moaner, If I Were a Train, and The Find, The Burial Society. Sandler's work is published by Smith & Krauss Vintage Press and Samuel French. She's a full-time professor at my alma mater, NYU, not Tisch though, NYU Tisch School of the Arts, the Canbar Institute of Film and Television, where she also guides the Fusion Film Festival, celebrating women in film, TV, and new media. Julia Scotti, Funny That Way, won the Audience Choice at the Paley Center for New Media Doc Pitch, and it is her directing debut. Thank you so much, Susan, for being here. We're thrilled. And our moderator today is Alex Berg, also using she, her pronouns. Alex is the host, producer, and journalist who covers national news and LGBTQ issues for a range of outlets. She was recently a co-host of the BuzzFeed News morning show, AM to DM, where she interviewed everyone from Oscar winners to 2020 presidential candidates. Hosted the LGBTQ Nation podcast, which covered weekly topics related to queer and trans people, and currently co-hosts the I'm From Driftwood podcast, amplifying the experiences of LGBTQ people across the country. You can see her work at itsalexberg.com. And last but not least, we would like to thank our sponsors at AARP New York for supporting our work and this fabulous event. Erin Mitchell, their Director of Engagement, using she, her pronouns, would like to share a few words. Erin?
Thank you so much, Christina. AARP is just beyond thrilled to be co-partners in this with you. On behalf of AARP New York, we welcome you to today's Sage virtual event. AARP New York has teamed up with Sage to present this question and answer with Julia Scotti herself. From Julia Scotti, Funny That Way. This event is one of a series and Pride-related community activities AARP is supporting to celebrate Pride Month. AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering Americans 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. AARP works to strengthen communities and advocate for what matters most to families, with a focus on health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. We collaborated with Sage earlier this year on a report highlighting disparities older LGBTQ New Yorkers face and recommending solutions. We in SAGE help the New York State Office for the Aging develop a work plan to help the state better serve LGBTQ older adults. We offer information and resources for New Yorkers age 50 plus and their families on our websites, as well as all of our virtual programming. We hope that you check it out on what we have going on at aarp.org/nearyou. Thanks, Christina, and back to you.
Can y'all hear me now? Yes, thank you. There's always a tech problem. It doesn't matter how good you are. Thank you so much, Erin, for those words. And again, for AARP's support. We really appreciate our work together. And I would like to now kick it off to our moderator, Alex Berg. Alex, thank you again so much for being a part of this. And I can't wait to hear your questions. Take it away.
I am so delighted to be here. A huge thank you to SAGE and AARP for having me. I'm just going to jump right into it and say that this movie was just so delightful to watch. It had me laughing. It pretty much had me crying. It was tender and funny, but it also did a really excellent job of laying out the oppression that transgender people face, while at the same time telling a nuanced story about Julia's life. So I'm delighted to be talking to Julia and Susan about it. On that note, Julia, I want to start off with you. What made you agree to go through this process and have your life filmed over 5 years?
I had met Susan in Nantucket, and that's after a show. We got to know each other, and we were talking about possibly doing a one-woman show for me, and she agreed to help me. And you know, as we delved into my life and background and experiences, she eventually said, you know, this should be a documentary. And I at the time I said, well, okay. I don't really think my life was all that interesting. You know, I really didn't. I mean, I was there. I don't remember it being that interesting. But, you know, she began to cull all this material together, and you know, you have to have faith in a person's ability. And she had a track record of successes, and you know, and I have trust issues to begin with. She conquered those, and I felt comfortable putting my life in her hands, literally, you know.
I mean, I laugh because I feel like this was such a compelling story to tell. And also, you know, we rarely, I think, get to see a lot of LGBTQ stories from folks and about folks over the age of 50. And I understand in this media moment why it's so important that we're focusing on young people, but I thought it was really wonderful to just see the breadth and longevity of your story. Susan, how did you find Julia? How did you end up at that show?
We have a wonderful connection through a dear friend named Jane Condon, who is a brilliant comedian and a person who makes stuff happen. I worked with her on her one-woman show. I helped her organize that and brought a producer to her. But what happens every summer is Jane organizes a really delicious lineup of talent, mostly women, that she brings to Nantucket. And because we're very tight, I always love to hang out and meet everybody that she introduces me to. And I saw Julia first on stage at the Dreamland Theater, and she just knocked me out, just absolutely knocked me out. I loved everything about her comedy, which was so much about really brilliant storytelling. And as a writer, that's what drew me in, that she was telling very rich, complex stories that felt to me like the kind of dangerous comedy that I heard from early Richard Pryor. And that's really where I just got very excited in everything about Julia. And we started talking about working together. I didn't know where it was going to go, but the more I found out about what was, you know, the content of her story, the idea that she had transitioned 20 years ago, that she'd had an earlier career, and that her children had just come back into her life after a 15-year estrangement. All of that, you know, along with the idea of this wealth of archival material, those were the those were the pieces that just leapt up and said to me, this wants to be a documentary. This is a rich, wonderful character who I was beginning to really enjoy every aspect of. And then those layers began to accumulate, the idea of the drama of her story that was accelerating with the return of her children. So all of that announced itself to me as wanting to be a doc. I had never made a documentary before. My background is in narrative film. So what I learned in this 5-year extraordinary adventure was that you follow the truth. That's where good stuff happens. And what Julia does in her comedy, what she does in her life, what she does in every aspect of what she brings to the people around her is to do exactly that. And those were the guideposts for me in finding the story and in building the film all together.
Well, I love what you said about following the truth, because I was really struck by this thing that Julia said at the beginning of the film, which is this quote: "I both bless and curse the day I became aware of who and what I was." I found this to be so relatable, even as a cis queer person. Julia, what did you mean by that?
You go through life with this gnawing that something's, as I like to say in Italian, stonato. You're out of tune. You don't quite know what it is. And when you do realize what it is, it fills that gap and makes you, oh God, at least I know. Now I know it's something I can deal with. And then you have to deal with it. And dealing with it 20 years ago, it's not easy today. It was 20 years harder back then because there wasn't a whole lot of information. There wasn't a whole lot of support. And so I was alone. I was adrift in this world of transgender people. And I had no idea what I was doing. It was scary. It was very, very scary. So I blessed and cursed it at the same time. And plus I knew it was going to be a tough road. I didn't know how tough, but yeah.
What was it like for you to go through the 5 years being followed by a camera and then also have to retell all of these moments of your life?
I'm used to, being on camera, so that's, that comes pretty natural to me. And Susan was not at all intrusive. She would make appointments. Even when I was recovering from open heart surgery, I woke up and, there's a camera crew in my hospital room. Did I die? I had no idea what happened. But she was very sensitive to a lot of the things that I was going, particularly when it came to my kids. Going through some of the old footage was a little difficult, as you might imagine. There's a scene in the movie where I'm yelling at myself, but it was revelatory. It wasn't scary at all, I don't think.
Well, you mentioned some of the archival footage. I was really struck by one scene in particular, and I'm sure that you probably know what I'm talking about, some of the jokes that you were telling, where it's very of the 1980s, where you are on stage telling actually transphobic jokes at the time, which were really, unfortunately, they were, I think, part of the comedic zeitgeist. And even today, I mean, these are still some things that we hear on stage. And I think that, and I hope the cultural tide is changing and more mainstream audiences are pushing back. But what was it like for you to be watching that footage now?
It was awful. I do recall that I was going through, at the time, I was already questioning what was going on with me. I thought that it was gay. I didn't know. Obviously, there was, who knew anything about being transgender at that point. And so being gay seemed to be the only logical answer to what I was feeling. And so to combat that, in my head at least, I just went the opposite route and became, uber macho and making fun of everything. And I've come to find out that a lot of people, gay men went through that, or trans people went through that kind of period in their life where they just fight back. You just don't want to be what you are. But, sooner or later, your truth knocks on the door and you have to answer it.
Susan, what was it like for you to go through archival footage when you would find moments like that? Were you like, oh, this is definitely going to make it into the film? When you're shooting a moment like that, you're like, this is a scene.
Well, the process of discovering every aspect of Julia Scotti began with my crawling into her closet, quite literally,
And figuratively.
and digging out boxes and boxes and boxes of everything. And she was so extraordinarily generous. She let me walk out of her house with tons of videos and journals and every piece of writing that she'd ever done. So my job for the early part of this project was just to completely absorb myself in all things Julia. And that's what I did. And so that the treasures that I found, the archival jewels, the first step in that was restoring a lot of these archival tapes, which were not, necessarily beautifully stored and weren't necessarily beautifully shot in the original configuration. So just making them viewable, then looking at everything and documenting everything and trying to figure out how to use everything. And exactly right, Alex, in that process, the notes that I took as I was combing through everything, there would be moments that were, oh yeah, this is really extraordinary. What I did for that particular scene that you're talking about is I put together a compilation of archival material that I thought would tell a story, specifically that was the then and now story of what was happening on stage. Comedians work out their stuff on stage, that sense of, what the struggle was, what Julia was wrestling with in terms of her identity. And that's where the truth is found. And that's what she was doing then as Rick, trying to figure out that identity. And there it was, there it surfaced very vividly in those sequences. So what I had hoped to do was to screen that for Julia. And as it happened, her son Dan was there that day as well. So it became a really exciting afternoon of this dive into the past. And Julia and Dan have found such a great place of conversation through comedy. Dan is a wonderful sketch writer and just has a great comedic everything. So their conversation around comedy was kind of a through line in every meeting that we shot. And his being able to view this footage with Julia was, as she just said, both dramatic and revelatory, and pretty exciting moment in the film.
It just as a sidebar, comedians do grow with their, the comedian's comedy does grow as they get, as they mature. My comedy today looks nothing like it did 20 years ago. I talk about what's going on in my life right now. So, at that point where that was shot, that's exactly what I was feeling. I was just confused as hell.
I mean, it's also just, it was really fun watching your banter with your son. It was really funny. And also it's humorous and it's also really tender. And speaking of the way that your own sense of humor has evolved, I mean, like, it seems like, now you have so much amazing life experience and interesting experiences to work with for your material. Has the way you write jokes, you mentioned as we were kicking things off today that you've been working out a punchline for like the past couple of hours. Has that process changed for you at all? Or do you kind of still approach things the same way?
It has matured. I've become much more focused on the writing of the joke. I used to be able to just go up. I could still do it. I'll go up on stage and I could ad-lib a 45-minute set without ever doing any material if I wanted to. I don't want to do that now because I'm doing another album in the fall, and I'm trying to put that material in so that it makes some sense. And I'll give you an example. The joke I'm working on right now is about how I was at a traffic light and a funeral procession went by and there was only one car behind the hearse. And I thought, geez, that's sad. And I go, I hope I have more cars than that. I want like a parade behind me. And it led to this whole idea about what you have to do in life to, guarantee that you're going to have a lot of cars. So that's where the thread of this bit is going. It's a touchy subject, but I'm kind of up for the challenge at this point.
I would imagine that there can't possibly be anything that you're afraid of at this point in comedy.
No.
Nah.
I dropped the F-bomb on national television. I think once you do that, you're allowed to, to do whatever you want to.
Yeah, you're good. Well, at the beginning, when we first started talking, I mentioned that, right now there is a great deal of focus on young trans people in the media, and rightfully so, because of what is happening politically. We've seen dozens of anti-trans bills introduced this year, and most of them are targeted towards young people. But I really appreciated that one big inflection point in the timeline of this story is that, Julia, you came out in your 40s and you're navigating being trans as a person over 50. What do you hope viewers take away from that piece of the story?
Well, if you are trans, that you can have a life beyond, the struggle that you're going through. I hate to sound trite and cliche, but it does get better. You can realize your dreams if you want to. For people who are cisgender people, which makes up, by the way, 99% of my audience. They come out of there going, she's just like everybody else. And that's kind of what I want them to realize, is that we aren't just like everybody else. We have the same feelings, the same dreams, the same hopes, all of that. We want to be loved. We love. Why is that so hard to understand? And why do you feel like it's your place to keep me down? Don't keep me down. I'll get another sidebar here, and I'm sorry, but my show this past weekend, for some reason we had a lot. I think it had to do with the movie, the release of the movie. Julie Scotti, funny that way. We had a number of trans folks at the show, and we had a young trans couple, two young guys, and I brought them up on stage. They were celebrating their anniversary. It was one of the most beautiful, joyous moments in my entire comedy career. And you know what? The audience went nuts. Majority cisgender audience clapped, screamed, cheered. It was just a really, really sweet moment.
That sounds really, really lovely and very affirming. Susan, I could see you nodding for a sec. What do you hope people take away after they see the movie?
I think Julia's story is so much about resilience and joy, that the inspiration is there for everybody of every age. The idea that we meet someone who makes a decision to find her truth, act on that against all odds, and achieves, in her career so much joy for her audience, with all kinds of obstacles that have to do with health issues and separation from family and all of the pieces, in the story that we see inside of that in all the years that I've been working with Julia. And you can't work on a project for 5 years without really enjoying the company of your subject. And that, is multiplied in every day that we work together, and we continue to work together on other things. So the joy that Julia takes in being in the moment, being alive in the moment, and being positive in the moment is a life lesson that I embrace so completely, that I think is cross-generational. And what I'd love to see happening with this film is, I think it's inspiring on so many levels for so many generations. I think Julia as a comedian, as a teacher, as an inspiration, as a human being who understands what it is to live fully in the moment, is just an enormous joy to be with. So the engine of this film, what kept me going, because this is an indie doc, which means it's not commissioned, nobody's asking me to make this. I just kept finding the energy and building support over this 5 years. And it was a real, it was moving the rock up the mountain. It was a lot of work. But because I was so completely invested in telling Julia's story for all of those reasons, that, it continued, I was energized by her. And that's what I hope this film will do. I think it's going to bring a lot of joy and a lot of inspiration, and a lot of affirmation to people across generations. So I think it's really unique and a blessing.
Well, to sort of begin to wrap things up before we open it up to the Q&A, Julia, I have to ask about you. On America's Got Talent, you mentioned dropping the F-bomb on national television. Nothing could possibly scare you. Have you ever had to deal with stage fright at all? Does that ever come up for you?
Oh, sure. I mean, I'll give you an example. On the third episode of AGT, which was live, I was having problems with my hips back then. I was afraid of falling before I hit my mark. It's a long walk from backstage to, and you really can't see very well because it's, the lights are in your eyes. And I'm just, I said a prayer, please don't let me fall on live television. So yeah, I get frightened of those kinds of things. I'm not afraid of crowds though. They don't scare me anymore. I like them. I'm most at home when I'm behind that microphone. That's where it's probably the only place I feel like I belong.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that you're back out doing shows. What's next for you? Where can people see you?
I'm going on the road. I'll be in Danbury this weekend. I'm going to be down in Delaware at the Midland Theater on Friday night. We're going to Richmond next week. So we're hitting the road, and I'm hoping to see people come out. It's so good to be back out again.
I can only imagine that. I mean, I love doing stuff from home and digitally like we're doing here, but I would imagine for you and for comics, you gotta like suck up that energy from the audience, right? There must be nothing like being in person.
Oh no, it's our air, it's our food, it's our, it's everything for us. And I meet with a writing group, but we couldn't even do that during COVID, and so we were doing these shows, Zoom shows. It was horrible. Didn't do anything, but at least it was something. Now we're all fired up. Where'd you work this weekend? Yeah, where'd you work? We're trading war stories again, just like old times.
Yeah. Susan, where can folks see the movie? What's next for you?
Everyone can see the movie everywhere. We're streaming on Apple, iTunes, Amazon Prime. I just got an email before that we're now placed on DirecTV. So everywhere you want to go, you're going to find us streaming. And to find out information about the film and to watch the trailer and to find out backgrounds about everything to do with the film, our website, which is juliascottifilm.com, is where people can go to find links to everything, where to watch and how to contact us and all that good stuff.
And I guess I should ask you both one more thing, which is any plans for Pride?
I've been doing Pride shows, so I'm not a big party animal. So, but it's really a lot of fun doing the Pride shows. Yeah, that's where I'm at. In fact, the Delaware show and the one in Connecticut are Pride shows.
Well, I just walk around with a big Julia Scotti Funny That Way tattoo on. That's what I do.
We had to get her drunk to get her to get the tattoo, though.
Well, that wraps up all of my questions. I just thank you both so much for this film and for taking the time to chat with us today. And it looks like we're getting some comments in the chat. And Christina, should I kick it back to you to open it up for other questions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you all so much. What a wonderful conversation. And my video is lagging because I moved spaces, so forgive me if I seem a little bit laggy, but I will start off with a question. While maybe people want to think of a question, please feel free to put them in the chat. So mine I did put in the chat. Julia, our tagline at Sage is "We refuse to be invisible." We did a rebrand a couple of years ago, and a lot of our elders and constituents really felt that embodied how they wanted the world to see them. That said, as Alex also alluded to, right, there is this sense, especially with the transgender and non-binary community, of going back into the closet or hiding or not really being seen, and you embody that we refuse to be invisible, like times 1,010. So what would you say to other trans elders or older folks who maybe haven't come out yet or are having these feelings, or what would you offer them in your process?
I'll tell them exactly what I told myself. Prior to my coming out, I was living in a prison of my own making. When I transitioned, I was filled with guilt and shame, and I found myself putting myself in another prison. Why would you trade one prison for another? You're finally who you are. Enjoy your life. Don't be invisible. Be loud, be proud, be you. You earned it. Don't make me come out there.
Because you will, and then you'll get them a tattoo. Thank you for that. I think that's really valuable and something that I'm hoping maybe post pandemic, when our stage centers are open, if we can get you to do a comedy show at one of our
I'd love that.
centers, I think that would be inspiring. So yeah, we'll have to be in touch. But yeah, that was one of my questions, and I'd love to see if anyone else out there has anything to ask. I can certainly think of a few more, but I welcome, we could put it in the chat, or if you feel very bold, you can unmute yourself, and we can hear your voice. So
I'm going to chat a bit about Julia, if I may.
Yeah.
I just want to put it out there in terms of your audience, the idea that Julia has a great career ahead of her as an actress. And I'm really excited in my narrative writing career to be working on material for Julia. And I encourage anyone in your audience, in your sphere, who is writing, to think about Julia. She's got an incredible range as an actress. And I'm really excited, to see character actresses entering their career at her age and beginning that climb, because she's got so much to offer. So filmmakers, playwrights in this audience, think Julia Scotti for your next casting call.
I'm going to be the next geriatric Barbarella. I'll be floating around space. You don't remember Barbarella?
I got the reference.
Okay.
I mean, I work at a queer organization. Let's go, everybody. We have a question from Mitch in the chat. Mitch asked, Julia, you were afraid that one time when you were on stage and there was a gangster in the audience. Do you want to share that story?
Okay, this is my scribe.
This is your Mitch. Yeah.
Yes, this is my Mitch who when I was coming back, would come to my shows and literally with a yellow legal pad and write down the jokes and grade them. And we would go out for coffee afterwards and go over them one by one by one. He's my scribe. Thank you for bringing that up, Mitch. Back when I was Rick, I was kind of a hound, you might want to call it. And I was pretty promiscuous, and I was seeing a woman who was married to a wise guy. And I was on stage one night, and he he walked up to me and he handed me a bullet.
Wow.
And I said, well, what is this for? And he said, well, you've been blanking my wife, and if you don't stop, the next one's going to go in your effing head. This is while I'm on stage. And I'm like, well, okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I will definitely take that into consideration. And that was that. Needless to say, I didn't get a bullet in my head, but it was scary.
Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch, for that. Yeah.
Wow, Mitch, that is excellent. Thank you for being Julia's scribe and for that question. That sounds like a whole movie, actually. Playwrights, take note. Another question coming in. Julia, who are some of your role models, either other comedians or in general?
Oh, wow. Other comedians, there is a whole list of them that I'm a student of comedy. I teach a comedy course to aspiring comedians. We do cover them. I go back to the early years and the greats like Chaplin and Keaton and right through Lenny Bruce and all Joan Rivers. I mean, you name it. They're my heroes. In terms of personal role models, I have some. I just did a thing on Eleanor Roosevelt. She was a remarkable woman and apparently gay. And so, you got to give somebody who is such a great humanitarian and first lady and gay. That's the hat trick, man. Pulling that off was big stuff. But I mean, Susan's one of my role models too, because she's just such an incredible human being, and she's accomplished so much in her life. I like strong people who know what they want out of life, and don't let anybody stop them. Just go do it. So you too could be a role model of mine. Just fill out an application and it's 25 cents and 2 box tops from a box of cornflakes.
I love that question and really good answer. And I'm actually going to kick it to Susan just because I'm interested in your response. What about you? And Alex, I'd love to hear all of you.
Yeah, let's hear from Alex.
Oh my gosh. Okay, 3 names off the top of my head. Actually, I'll give 4. Definitely because I'm thinking about Pride Month. People that I look up to, I have to shout out Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Wouldn't be here celebrating Pride Month if not for their work. I would also add Brenda Howard. I identify as bisexual, and she is an unsung queero, so to speak, bisexual activist who is really present in the 80s organizing bisexual people. And then I would also shout out, I have to say there's so many amazing queer journalists, and I really admire and showrunners, and I really admire Stephen Canals and Janet Mock, who are behind the television show Pose, because I feel like the kind of journalism I do, I really want people to be more understanding of LGBTQ folks, but sometimes I feel like you're kind of yelling into the void, and people who are already engaging with my work, I've already convinced them. And so I really feel like that kind of representation on TV that we saw with Pose, it's like this Trojan horse of getting into people's hearts and minds through just a great, entertaining visual show. So those are all folks that I really look up to.
My big Valentine and dedication of this film is to the brilliant Louis Erskine, who is a consulting editor, and who just died last week, tragically. And he was, throughout the making of this project, so important to me, such a mentor, such a beautiful human being, such an inspiration to me. And in the documentary world, he's a godhead. And if you spend time on IMDb and look at his credits, the most recent, the Miles Davis doc, and an incredible speech that he gave at Sundance a few years ago on privilege, and the idea that making room in the places in the entertainment industry for people of color as decision makers, as leaders, is everything. And he was so important in that movement forward. So Louis Erskine is at the center of the dedication that I bring to this project. And I know, Julia, you got to meet him early on in our work, and you know how very special he was to us.
He was really, I only met him once, and he was just a very, very sweet man. And we got to talk jazz because he had done the Miles Davis doc, and I'm a big jazz fan. So yeah, we kind of miss him.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you all for your answers, Alex as well. Co-sign on many of those. Another question that we have in the chat, Julia, in what ways, oh, this is a good one, are you disrupting aging?
I was looking at that on the screen and trying to come up in every way I possibly can.
Yes.
If you throw an obstacle up in front of me, I'm gonna kick it down, even with my arthritic legs. That's it. That's the only answer I can give you.
It's a pretty great answer. I love it. So there's no more in the chat, so I want to give folks another opportunity. If anyone has a question for Julia or Susan, or if they'd like to ask Alex a question too, or bring it all to the group, please do. You can post it in the chat. So far, really, really fabulous conversation. And I love these questions. So if folks have another one, please, here we go. Gary. Julia, you mentioned teaching a comedy class. How can one enroll?
Well, I teach it through a friend of mine, Gabrielle Burbowicz, who runs Michael Howard Studios in New York City, is an online class, and I assume it's part of her conservatory. If you were really interested, by all means, reach out to Michael Howard Studios, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to hook you out.
Julia
Carrie-
sends me her curriculum every week, and it just is incredibly exciting. I would love to be in that class. Very privileged students there.
We really are pulling apart comedy for these kids because they've had no exposure to the masters, and they really need that. You know, they need to know where they came from as funny people, and they're primarily actors, so they don't have a lot of exposure to comedy acting either. So I'm trying to give them a sort of a well-rounded background on comedy, and also the techniques of what makes something funny. So I'm having a ball with it because I get to do, I taught 6th grade language arts, which is not nearly as much fun as teaching comedy to adults. So I'm having a ball because I'm finally able to share my love of comedy with young people.
Julie, you just said something that kind of tweaked my brain a little bit about how you need to teach the young kids about the classics and like the history. How do you feel that relates to LGBTQ younger people today in relation to history and all of it, right? It's Pride. Everyone's like, yay, rainbows. Target has a line. Everyone has a line, but what does it mean to you? And what is that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because on Facebook this month, I'm highlighting every day a different LGBTQ person who you may not have known was family. For instance, yesterday we did the great jazz singer Alberta Hunter, who many people were surprised to find out was a lesbian, and so in that way, and I have a lot of younger followers. Excuse me. So it does me good. We did Alan Turing today, and we're going to do Richard Chamberlain tomorrow. So I mean, in that way, it's kind of cool for me to teach too. Yeah, I think I'm a natural born teacher. I can't keep my mouth shut. So it's a good place to have a captive audience.
That's great. Alex, how do you feel about that question? Do you feel a connection to older queer people? What's your value feeling on it?
I mean, I feel like, you can't move forward without knowing what happened in the past. It's like, we can't just show up here without understanding the context and the history. And I also think there's so many lessons that we can also learn from queer elders that we can completely use today. For example, a couple of days ago, I was at the Brooklyn Liberation March, which was for trans youth. And, so I feel like so many of the tactics that activists are using, so many of the things that activists are fighting for today are exactly what folks have been fighting for all along. So I feel like we have to listen and we have to learn. And, I want to celebrate all the people whose names we don't even know as well. And I really want to preserve their stories because I just think it's so important to understand those legacies, and that on the one hand, so much has changed, but on the other hand, there's so many folks who, especially individuals who are living it with identities that are, multiply marginalized. And I feel like we can still really learn from past struggles of what we should be doing today. So I am all about preserving history, giving folks their flowers, learning it all, and taking those lessons with us.
Well said.
Well said.
Well said.
Yes. It's a poignant reminder that the Equality Act was first introduced in 1974, and it is still being fought for today. So, history doesn't end. So thank you for that. I'm going to offer it one more time because every time I do, someone comes through with a cute question. So if there are any more questions, feel free to put it in the chat. again, this was really, really wonderful. And I'm so glad there's a secret macher here, Lee Chu, who connected Sage and me with Susan and the film. So hello, Lee. Thank you very much. And yeah, this was really
Oh,
wonderful.
is that who Lee is with Lee's
Yeah.
iPad?
There
Oh,
he is.
yeah.
Yeah.
hi, Lee.
And Julia, Lee was at our shoot at Stand Up New York.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yes, I remember him. Yes, I do.
He asked you some very provocative questions, I think.
Well,
Lee's
he
very
hasn't
good at
asked me
doing
one
that.
today. Come on, Lee.
Oh, he's being quiet. You can put it in the
Okay.
chat, Lee. I don't trust you. Lee and I had some times at Sage. We do have a question. Mitch again. Susan, have you thought about adding a what Julia is doing now at the end of your film?
No, I think, the idea of what Julia is doing now is what people are going to walk out of the theater and figure out, pretty much for themselves, because the appetite is there. And everything that Julia is doing now is, going to be offered on our film's website. So I think the continuation of Julia's story is something that her audience, her growing, ever growing audience, is going to be following with, great excitement. And I love that this film is opening doors and giving her more access to more and more people and more opportunities. And I look forward to working with Julia, as I said earlier, on another project, which I think will be one where we get to see Julia as an actor in other roles.
If I could just jump in here too, because I'm seeing just since the movie's been out, a marked increase, uptick in my audiences who have seen the film already, and the demographic of my audiences has changed just in this past week, and I think that's going to continue as this movie gets out to more and more people. I don't think it's going to be one of those blockbuster movies where you gotta see it, and then 2 weeks later it's gone. I think this movie is one that is passed around. Just you got to see this movie, and before you know it, it's become like almost like a cult classic. That people pass around and as a teaching tool. At least I hope that's what happens.
And right now it's streaming everywhere. So, it's really a good time when people are still a little bit nervous about going into theaters. Kind of broke my heart that we haven't had the experience of sitting in a theater. Julie and I were longing for this, to be able to sit with an audience and experience the film and do a live Q&A. That's was heartbreaking not to be able to go on the festival circuit as we had planned, which was going to be Julia doing comedy at night and people understanding, the film was screening that day. So that was the whole rhythm of what we thought we were going to be doing for the last year. But it will, we will be going back to theaters. We're all a little bit timid about it right now. But when we do that, I'm really excited to sit with our community and watch the film and have conversations afterwards. But what some of my friends are doing, what I hear people are doing, are watch parties everywhere with the film. And that's, another way of gathering. And Julie and I are available for Q&As if you want to organize a watch party and contact us through the website. We're game.
And Mitch points out that we did get a shout out from Cyndi Lauper, which, that's not too shabby.
That is not too shabby at all. So I did put the link of the film in the chat where you can find out all the information about Julia Scotti film and where it's streaming and what Julia's up to. And Danbury, I lived right by Danbury, so
They can actually go to my website too. My schedule's up there, and the links to the film are up there too.
Fantastic.
And that's juliascotti.com, so they can.
That is, I will put this in the chat too. So, thank you again. This was super fun, and I'm just going to close it off with any last wise words as we finish up.
You mean sage words?
Yes.
Go ahead, Susan. You're much better at this than I am.
Oh, I mean, the wise words from this experience of going on this joyride with Julia Scotti are follow your instincts. When something in your nerve ending says, this is somebody I want to work with, somebody I want to be around, somebody who inspires me. Be fearless and go for it. You know, make that move. Put yourself in the room with people you respect. Put yourself in the room with people you love and admire, and good things will happen.
And I'm only going to say, the people that are hurting you, get rid of them, eject them from your life. Only let people, you know, that you love in your life, and your life will be a lot better off. Love is the only absolute. No room for hate.
Yes.
I think that is a beautiful way to end this. Thank you again so much. Alex, thank you for moderating and your great questions. It sound like Bugs Bunny.
Thank you.
Susan, thank you for contacting Sage and bringing this movie into the world and letting us see more of Julia. And Julia, thank you so much. Again, you could be a poster child for We Refuse to Be Invisible, and Sage. And I very much hope to have some sort of bigger watch party when we open up at our centers.
I would be honored to be there. Thank you.
It would be wonderful. And Erin Mitchell, thank you again for AARP New York support, not only for this event, but for a few of our other Pride events coming up. We're screening the Cured documentary later on this month, as well as a panel around Stonewall being a riot. So in addition to, there's those two programs, but we have a ton of programs virtually this year for our Sage Strong Pride. You can visit us on the web, sageusa.org/2021 Pride, and sign up. They're open to all. And again, this was really great. I love the film. I could talk so much more about like the kids aspect as someone who has kids, but I won't because we're done. But thank you. It was really wonderful.
Thank you.
Spread the word, everyone. Julia
Yes.
Scotti, funny that way.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.